The African Business Talk analyzes Africa's business development and how policies and initiatives affect the lives of the African. The talk aims at opening opportunities for industry as well as sound trade cultural practices between business owners and entrepreneurs in continental Africa and in the diaspora. Don't miss it as we engage think tanks, businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, chief executives, innovators and people who have worked to transform countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Benin, Togo, South Africa, Botswana, Egypt and many other African economies. The African Business Talk, live on Business Television Africa. You're welcome to Business Television. This is Talking Business. Today we'll be talking about opportunities in the banking sector. Before we do that, we'll go for a short break and then we'll come back to continue.
Looking for a venue for your wedding reception, conferences and retreats, outside catering, recreation? Look no further than Coconut Grove Beach Resort Hotel, located in Elmina. Coconut Grove Hotels, memories worth repeating.
Welcome back. Ghana is now becoming, and even now, a more diversified economy. If you look at the country at the moment, the oil sector is promising about 1.25 billion oil reserves. And if you look at the gas sector, we are promising about 22.7 billion cubic meters of oil and gas, specifically gas. This economy now needs the banking sector to be more vibrant. But however, we do not see that. Is that what we are expecting, or the banking sector needs to do a little bit more? We'll be talking on this subject with the CEO of First National, Mr. Patrick Anumel. Welcome, Mr. Patrick Anumel.
Thank you very much.
The banking sector in Ghana is more diversified today. I mean, the general economy is more diversified today. Is the banking sector ready to really take up the challenge as a diversified economy brings opportunities?
I would analyze it this way. If you talk about economy, we have basically three major areas that the economists look at. They look at agriculture, especially our kind of economy. They look at agriculture and they have manufacturing and services. Now, agriculture, we all know, has a role to play, but we have not been able to optimize what we can get from agriculture. So that is an area which sometimes we downplay. People are talking about oil, fine, oil, which is good. We can develop our oil and get to the highest of it. But for me, I think that we should not forget about agriculture and we should also not forget about manufacturing sector. These are areas, if we are able to hold on to, we will be able to really get our economy more diversified than what you started by saying. Because it's not just by discovering oil that diversifies the economy. I've talked about agriculture, I've talked about manufacture, I've talked about the services sector. Now, the oil and gas sector falls under manufacturing. So it's a subset of a whole big range of economic, spectrum. So it is true, we have a diversified economy, and the banking sector is really taking closer look at this and seeing the prospects in this. If you think of agriculture, there are a lot of areas that we can finance or we can advise. We have the agro business and we have the real farming itself. And even on the farming, we talk about tree crops and the cereals and other crops that we have in agriculture. Ghana in the past has concentrated on cocoa. but it is clear that we can diversify into cashew and oil, palm, which Malaysia used as the basis of their economic development. If we come to manufacture, we tend now to downplay on manufacture, but if we really get serious about it, it will also be a wheel which will turn the economy round. When I talk about manufacture, I talk about the industries, the textile industries, the aluminum industries, and a whole lot of them, the detergent industry, soap detergent, talk about food and beverages industry. All these are areas that we can develop to the extent that we can even export when we're able to satisfy the market that we have here. Then we come to the almighty oil and gas. You know, that is the latest find, and we're all excited. Everybody is virtually crazy about oil and gas. Yes, good. So it's diversified, and the banks are ready to really take advantage of whatever we have discovered.
You rightly said that the banks are involved in the agri sector. That might not necessarily be true, in the sense that the agri-business sector has been recording negative growth. If you look at the contribution to our GDP, hitherto, the agri-business sector was contributing significantly, and in fact, it was the leader to our GDP growth. If the banks indeed were supporting the sector enough, could we be recording the negatives?
Well, I haven't mentioned that the banks are financing. I was talking about the areas of the economy, diversified areas of the economy that the banks can look at. So now to your relevant question. It is true that the banks haven't been very much involved in agriculture financing. Agri Development Bank, which was actually established basically to help develop agriculture itself, is not very much involved in agriculture. We did an analysis and we found out that the monies that they dole out, only about 10%, 8 to 10% of it that goes to agriculture. And most of the banks in Ghana are shy of agriculture because of the risks involved. The reason why it's negative growth is not basically because the banks are not financing it. That's not it. It is because the policy that the government is rolling out doesn't put much emphasis on agriculture. It starts from the policy formation and the policy and then the drive of the implementation of whatever policies are out. So I think that we should get it straight. If the banks even go in now to pump money into agriculture and the necessary mitigating factors are not put in place, the growth in agriculture cannot come up. Because, for example, if we don't have irrigation, and we depend on the weather and so on, still, there'll be no growth.
Can't we have the banks coming in to support in that sector as well, bringing up irrigation, bringing up support in terms of machinery, input?
This is what I'm saying, that it starts from the policy, the agriculture policy of the nation.
Don't we have an agriculture policy?
We do, but you and I know that there's not much push in getting the policy implemented.
That's right.
That one is a fact.
That's right.
Otherwise, like you were saying, if the government comes out with a policy on irrigation and it becomes very attractive, why? The banks will come in.
There. Yes, that's right.
If the government comes out with a policy, for example, on large-scale farming,
that's right.
Instead of concentrating on subsistence farming, for example, the banks will be willing to
get in there.
Because then they know that, the government is really behind it. So it is true that it starts from the policy making side.
Let's move to another sector which I believe is much of an interest to all of us, the SME sector. Its contribution to national growth is very key. But I see that it's a sector that challenges the banks. Most banks do not want to support the SME sector. What could be the problem?
The SME sector basically is the private sector. I mean, most SME people are in the private sector. And therefore, the statement that is made that the private sector is the engine of growth is true. And therefore, we can substitute it and say that SME is the engine of growth of the economy. You are right. But there are challenges there. Look, if you look at the SME sector, you straight away see that there's a lack of capacity development there. Let me break it down and say that whoever are managers there and so on, very often, I'm speaking generally, very often are not very careful about who they employ and who are at the helm of affairs. In other words, management and people development there is not really given much attention to. That is number one, capacity development. Number two, there's not much push on innovation. So you find that people are there and they do the same thing all the time.
Over and over and over again.
Another point is that they don't look out for markets. And therefore, if they produce, you find that very soon their market is restricted, is limited either to Abosokai or Ghana, and therefore they can't even go out. They also lack the capital that you talked about, and this is where the banks come in. So the banks come in with a capital, and they want to make sure that whatever they are financing will not be a one-day wonder. Is that what we say?
Yeah, one-day wonder.
One-day wonder. You know, because just look at history, just a little bit. Where are the Kohu Motors? Where are the Apiaminkas? Where are the Addisons who set up paper conversion in Takoradi and so on?
Yeah.
And
they are gone.
You know, they're gone. And it is because it was private sector. They started like SME, they grew up, and there was no continuity.
In terms of management style?
Management style and taking over and so on. So this is what I'm talking about. So if the bank comes in and they see that the project is good, but they are not very happy about the management and so on, the people factor, they might shy away from it. Number two, if the banks come in, and that's why sometimes they will finance people up to a point and then they will just get out. If the banks come in and they find out that their monies are not really secured, they may not go in. So therefore, then...
But banks should be able to take a little bit of risk.
They do take a lot of risk, especially in Ghana. You'll be surprised. There are a lot of analysis that we do and we see the risk coming and we go in. For example, you find that what they are producing, they are limited in market, but we still go ahead with a view that we will help them to explore market outside Ghana and therefore expand the realm of the market. You know, that is a risk, but we go in still. So I'm saying that finally, most of the banks are now getting to the area of collateral financing, which should not be the case. You understand? In other words, they will tell you that, well, okay, how much would you need? They will go do the analysis and establish the fact that, oh, true, you need about 200,000 Ghana cedis. Then they will say, okay, this 200,000 cedis, if I give it to you and you don't pay, what is my, recourse? I mean, what would I fall back on? And then they start saying that, okay, let's use a building. Can we use your factory? If the factory building is not yours and so on, can you bring me a house or something? And it is because there have been a lot of tricks that have been played in the past. I am telling you, I have been in banking for quite a long time. People come, you see that they have genuine needs, you give them the money, they go out there and you find that they either divert. Sometimes they don't even put the money in the project that you analyzed and thought that he would need the money for. So with all this, then we say, oh, okay, fine, then let's do it this way. Just bring me the building so that in case you even run away or you can't do it or something, then I don't have my loan portfolio being, filled with doubtful and loss.
I mean, the banks today...
So that's how it comes up.
Yes, banks today are doing very well in managing their bad loans. If you look at the banks in Africa, they've been able to reduce risk in their businesses, and then they've been able to capitalize their businesses. So banks today are much more in a position to do a lot of big businesses in Africa, specifically in Ghana. I mean, the recapitalization of our banks have really helped us. But we'll be looking at that sector of the oil and gas in banks, moving into the oil and gas sector when we come back from this break.
Looking for a venue for your wedding reception, conferences and retreats, outside catering, recreation? Look no further than Coconut Grove Beach Resort Hotel, located in Elmina. Coconut Grove Hotels, memories worth repeating.
The African Business Talk analyzes Africa's business development and how policies and initiatives affect the lives of the African. The talk aims at opening opportunities for industry as well as sound trade culture practices between business owners and entrepreneurs in continental Africa and in the diaspora. Don't miss it as we engage think tanks, businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, chief executives, innovators, and people who have worked to transform countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Benin, Togo, South Africa, Botswana, Egypt, and many other African economies. The African Business Talk, live on Business Television Africa. You're welcome back to Talking Business on Business Television Africa. We're talking to the Chief Executive Officer of First National, Mr. Patrick Anumel. Mr. Anumel, you know, we're talking about capitalization of the banking sector. All over Africa, Nigeria did it big time. I know Liberia are looking at how they can get the banking sector recapitalized very well. Ghana has also done the recapitalization. Banks are now managing their risk, you know, looking at risk management critically. There is a new sector that has come up in Ghana, the oil and gas sector. It was the expectation, I believe, that the recapitalization will help the banks to really move into the oil and gas sector, to support the sector. We had issues to do with insurance companies not being able to form a conglomerate or a big cartel to, you know, really support and ensure the oil sector, for example. Has the banks taken advantage of the oil sector?
Yeah, I would say yes. Yes, because you see, if you look at the oil and gas sector, there are two major categories that you can finance. What I would call the primary, and then the secondary. The primary will then belong to those who actually are in the production of the oil and gas. You talk about the tolls and so on and so forth. And then the secondary will be the ancillary businesses that support these big companies, like the caterers, like those who provide the ICT services, like the accounting firms and so on, who provide the services for such big companies, you know. Now, if you look at the main companies, they normally get their finances from outside. But if, for any reason, there are some of the companies which will require some financing from inside, I know that some banks already have gotten together in what we call syndication financing.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way to go, because if the need of a company is, say, about 200 million US dollars, maybe one bank in Ghana how many banks can have their total asset or even have their capital to support this? So then it calls for what we call syndication. So
That's right.
they will syndicate and finance it.
Finance it.
I know that a few banks have done some syndication to finance some secondary level, you know, financing. And I also know that there are a lot of companies in the oil and gas industry who do supplies, and so on. They have been financed by the banks. I'm talking about even those oil marketing companies like Goil, like Total, and so on. Some of them have been financed by the banks. So yes, the banks are taking advantage of the oil and gas industries and therefore financing some of the companies, both primary and the secondary sector.
Do you feel the impact of the bank supporting it?
Well, it's the beginning, you know, it's the beginning of it. So I am very hopeful that as the industry expands, you find them all rushing into it. But you'll be surprised that a lot of the banks are now having what we call corporate department because of this. You know, because if you have a corporate department, the next will be to specialize in oil and gas. So very soon, as I said, you find that in the next few months and few years, you find all the banks will be having Department of Oil and Gas.
Don't you think that then there will be a diversion of attention if the oil and gas sector becomes a bigger boom, increase the bottom line? So these companies, they might, I mean, that's perhaps that could be the reason why the SME sectors and other sectors of the economy are suffering.
No, I wouldn't say that's the reason why the SMEs are suffering at the moment. I've already said that the banks sometimes they take a lot of precautions in financing the SME, but we have some banks who have specialized in financing SMEs. So that one is there. But let's come back quickly and look at whether the boom and so on will divert attention of the banks from other financing. That is why there have been a lot of conferences and a lot of workshops on this Ghana oil and gas discovery, if you remember. There is the feeling that we might go the Nigerian way, give all attention to oil and gas, ignore agriculture, ignore SME, and then the long run we come back and find out, we should not have put all our eggs in one bag. Because of that, from the very onset, even the banks, we are careful not to just abandon everything we are doing and rush after oil and gas. So I think with this awareness and consciousness, it will not happen in Ghana. This is my belief.
Now, looking at the reforms that are happening in the banking sector, which is very encouraging, there seems to be no parity with what we practice here to the world, to the outside world. What could be the reason, and are we not really disassociating ourselves from best practice and norms?
I would say yes and no. You know, because you are saying that we are not going with the international world and there's a parity. I am saying that we are going with them, but in Ghana we have our own challenges. We are going with them because we have what we call Basel II, Basel 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And that requires that if you're a bank, you follow that standard. And it has to do with capital adequacy. If your capital adequacy is below 8%, you will have to pack off.
That's right.
So Central Bank, for example, ensures that all the banks who are in Ghana are able to stick to standard. Another example, if you're a bank in Ghana and you want to do foreign trade and so on, or foreign banking and so on, there are certain standards that you have to adopt. And all the banks are adopting these standards. For example, we have what we call UCP 560. That is, these are regulations that we use for establishing LCs.
That's right.
We have some for establishing collections. These are things which are reviewed periodically. And even the one I talked about, the regulations or the rules that we use for collection and so on, have just been reviewed or revised. And Ghana has no option but to adopt. So in that way, we are all doing the same thing as far as international banking is concerned. But if you come home and you find that our interest rates and so on are very high,
that's right.
Then you say, why is it that in Ghana interest rates hover around 23%, 25%, some even charge 30%. If you go to savings and loans, they charge 32, 40 and so on. But if you go to Europe or America, even Asia, it is rare to get a bank which will charge interest rate at 10% or 12 and so on.
That's right.
So for that, I would say, well, okay, fine. That way would say, there's some parity. And how does it arise? I think that it has to do with the economy. The economy determines the inflation, determines Bank of Ghana prime rate, determines the T-bill rate, determines, therefore, the interest rate that the banks will charge. So for me, I would say that if you come inside, you'll find some of such disparity.
One thing that also, talking about conforming to global standards, I find the cashless economy an interesting one, where I see Ghana as an example that wants to enter into a cashless economy. But it's having blockades. The education, the acceptance of it is getting little attention. Do you think that we either have to speed it up or we slow it down or educate more people on this?
Certainly, we have to speed it up. You hit the nail on the head, right, when you said education. Education is a factor because, you see, if you go to Makola, if you go to Agunan Kwanta Market, Mankesi Market, and so on, people are used to holding their money and feeling that, yes, I have sold things and I've gotten 200,000 Ghana cedis. This is it. This is how they get their comfort in, feeling that they have earned money. Now, with education, introduction of ATMs and so on, as has been introduced by First National and other banks, you find that people gradually are getting used to the card system, where they will hold money not in the form of physical cash, but in the form of electronic money, in the form of card. This is where we should trumpet. You know, if we do that, then gradually we get people used to the fact that, oh, I don't have to pack all my money in my pocket. I don't have to pack all my money in my purse or my handbag to feel that I have money. When I'm holding this card, it is money. So gradually with education, I think that it will come on. And once it comes on, then this cashless economy will see that it's working. But at the moment, we need a lot of education. A lot.
Yeah, that's really true. We're getting to the end of our conversation anyway, but my final question, interestingly, I find innovation and service offering perhaps a challenge to the banks in Ghana. I mean, let me broaden it to Africa. The banks are not being innovative. One brings up a strategy or an innovative product, you find the other person also, changing some A's and B's and just rolling it out. Are we challenged in terms of research and development, and even after that, service offerings? When can we get there?
When can we get there is a big question. I wish I could answer you, but I can say that the way things are going, it will not be it will be very soon that we get there.
Very soon.
Because, yes, and I'm saying this because there's a lot of competition in the banking sector now.
Yes.
A lot of competition to the extent that people know.
Is the competition bringing diversity? Is
I
the
think
competition
so.
bringing
I think so.
innovative
I think
products?
so. I think so. And I'll tell you that it's forcing a lot of the banks now to set up marketing department, to set up research and development department. And the reason why they're doing that is they want to beat their competitor. And the way to do it is to know what the needs of your customers are. It's only when you're able to establish the needs of your customers, then you can go back on your desk or into your research room or your laboratory and try and design some products that will satisfy their needs. And banks gradually have become conscious of that. So that's why, every bank now is setting up a department which will be responsible for either research and development or marketing research, so they can develop the product and so on. Because don't forget that the citizenry, the Ghanaian now is becoming sophisticated because a lot of them travel, and when they travel, they get a taste of what it is like in Europe and America. Then they want to come here and demand such service. So they would demand things like money, electronic money, they would demand things like electronic purse, mobile banking, and so on and so forth. So gradually the competition is making this possible.
But these innovations are to the higher, lower middle income people. But what about the people on the ordinary Ghanaian? Are these fitting them?
We have a problem there because most of the banks are not willing to go to the hinterland. And that is where we have a bulk of the people who need banking services. We are told that about 70 to 80% of our population are unbanked. So you can imagine that if basic banking hasn't reached them, how much more such sophisticated, innovative products like cards and electronic purse and so on that I was talking about. So for me, I would say that let's satisfy them, give them basic banking needs, how they can keep their money in the bank, how they can withdraw their money from the bank without much effort, And I believe that once we're able to satisfy that, we can build on it and get a sophistication and innovation you're talking about.
Thank you very much, Patrick Anumel. That was the Chief Executive Officer of First National. This is Talking Business. We talked about opportunities in the banking sector. We looked at Ghana. And indeed, the banking sector in Ghana is really growing. But as he said, we need to be innovative. We need to be more innovative in products aspect and be able to attract a lot more people, especially the people that are unbanked. Talking Business is coming your way next week. Thank you. The African Business Talk analyzes Africa's business development and how policies and initiatives affect the lives of the African. The talk aims at opening opportunities for industry as well as sound trade culture practices between business owners and entrepreneurs in continental Africa and in the diaspora. Don't miss it as we engage think tanks, businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, chief executives, innovators, and people who have worked to transform countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Benin, Togo, South Africa, Botswana, Egypt, and many other African economies. The African Business Talk, live on Business Television Africa.